Conservation versus natural selection. The topic that I wanted to research was, does wildlife conservation conflict with natural selection? What I know is that wildlife conservation is the act of protecting and maintaining wildlife and their habitat. It's important for species to evolve to protect themselves. All organisms have basic needs to survive, and if their habitat does not meet these needs, they will die. Once a species becomes extinct, it cannot come back. People rely on a variety of plants and animals for a lot of needs. Nature needs a balance between humans and wildlife for sustainability. Species are disappearing at a much faster rate over time because of human-related factors. Species naturally appear and disappear over time. Natural selection and survival of the fittest are evolutionary processes. And natural selection is when organisms that haven't adapted to their surroundings usually die out. What I wanted to know was, what are the main methods of wildlife conservation? Who is involved in wildlife conservation? What are the main reasons that species become endangered? What role does evolution have in wildlife management? Are there any positives to natural selection? What would the repercussions be if people let animals continue to go extinct? What effect would loss of biodiversity have on the planet? Is there a such thing as overmanaging wildlife, and why do we protect endangered species? So this is what I learned, and each page corresponds to one of the questions that I wanted to know. What role does evolution have in wildlife management and protection? Evolutionary biology is important in conservation because it is a particular example of the general problem that evolutionary biologists work with. What they study is how species expand or contract in the environment they occupy. Some species are very successful and occupy a lot of different environments, and others are dwindling down to extinction. These two situations are evolutionary processes. Changes in population, demographics, and genetics over time all affect bibliography, the study of the distribution of living organisms and what mechanisms affect their bibliography of the species. The mechanisms that evolutionary biologists are interested in include natural selection, migration patterns, origin of new mutations, changes in the DNA that allow certain species to evolve. So evolution is significant to wildlife protection because it teaches biologists how organisms are adapting and what type of environments they can survive in. What are the main methods of wildlife conservation? Protection by law, establishment of protected areas, restoration of original habitat, educating the public, and training of wildlife management. Who is involved in wildlife conservation? There are many public organizations and private landowners who are involved in wildlife conservation all over the world. Basically, anyone can get involved in wildlife conservation right in their own community. These are just 10 of the very successful global organizations that I picked to research a little bit about. The Nature Conservancy, the World Wildlife Fund, Natural Resources Defense Council, the Sierra Club, International Crane Foundation, Friends of Halakea Park, Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, Oceana, Conservation International, and Wildlife Conservation Society. What would the repercussions be if people let animals continue to go extinct? If people continue to let animals go extinct, biodiversity will become unbalanced. The animal food chain will be disrupted because some species will lose a food source and others will lose a predator. Prey populations can increase rapidly, but others may suffer. This domino effect is called a trophic cascade. Even small plants and animals have a great impact on their ecosystem if they're omitted. The web of life in each ecosystem is very fragile, and all parts are needed to maintain harmony. Extinction of some species can even have physical effect on the environment because of the pollution, animal burrows, and many other reasons. Is there such thing as overmanaging wildlife? Well, I found that there are two general types of wildlife management. Manipulative management is directly changing the population by altering the food source, habitat, etc. Custodial management is the protective method, which is minimizing the external influences of the population on its habitat. One situation where animals are overmanaged that I found is when they're placed in zoos or conservation areas, but they're not treated as wildlife. Because if animals are put in a sanctuary and they start relying on humans to feed them, they probably won't do very well in the wild when they're released again. What are the main reasons that species become endangered? I found that destruction of habitat, pollution, overhunting and poaching, and invasive species and natural causes are the main reasons that species become endangered. What effect would loss of biodiversity have on the planet? A loss of biodiversity would mean more air pollution because the forests are what is purifying our air. Nitrogen pollution in the water would increase because wetlands are the most effective way of purifying fresh water. There would be a loss of medicines currently available because about half of the ones we have are made from natural products. Without forests, soil fertility would drop because natural forest soils have the highest content of nutrients. The Earth's carbon cycle would be off balance because forests and coral reefs contain the most significant carbon reservoirs, which greatly contribute to regulating the global climate. And about 1/3 of the world's food crops would disappear because the flowering plants rely on animals like bees and butterflies to help them reproduce through pollination. Are there any positives to natural selection? Individuals with characteristics that are advantageous for reproduction in a specific environment leave more offspring. This means that the next generation is better suited to the environment because of their evolutionary changes. Organisms can adapt in ways to protect themselves, like defensive behavior, toxins, size, armor, speed, and modifications to go undetected. Some plants have even overcome human poisons and become pesticide resistant. Natural selection may also result in disease prevention because those who survive with a cell mutation causing immunity continue to mate and produce immune offspring. So for the pictures, I just picked some animals that have adapted to protect themselves, like stinging nettles, poisonous frogs, and armadillos. Why do we protect endangered species? If a species goes extinct, it is lost forever. Maintaining biodiversity allows the preservation of genetic reservoirs, which allows us to make our crops better by introducing variation, and animals can continue to evolve. Many medicines and new products we developed come from natural resources. Scientists also need biological diversity to do biological research. If nothing else, we protect endangered species so they will be around for many years and we can create a sustainable environment for the future generations. Conclusion. In my opinion, wildlife conservation does not conflict with natural selection. Protecting wildlife is how humans are trying to balance their negative impacts. Most of the reasons why species are going extinct are actually human-related. So yes, it is true that extinction is a natural process, but humans have sped up the extinction rate to a very unhealthy pace. Natural selection continues to occur in the wild where habitats are being protected anyways, and this means that evolution is continuing as usual. Conservation is very important because if we stop trying to bring back the wildlife, we would lose biodiversity. And as I learned, the entire planet, including people, would suffer tremendously. Natural selection is an important part of life as well because it allows species to adapt to their environments and continue living. Conservation and natural selection are needed because they both support each other and help to balance human effects on the planet. During this project, I really learned a lot about the biology of animal conservation and evolutionary techniques. I've always been very interested in the science side of conservation, and I felt like this course gave me a great opportunity to further explore this. This course has covered such a great variety of topics about wildlife management that I really felt as I had a strong general understanding to begin my final project. I enjoyed learning about different methods of conservation, human impacts on nature, and the ways that different people and cultures feel about certain animals. 2 more questions that I would be interested in researching after finishing this project are conservation efforts balancing negative human impact yet, and how do we know when they do? And does human action have an impact on evolution? And these are my sources: Endangered Species International, Quora, Evolutionary Ecology, the book, Action Bioscience, Rolling Hills Wildlife Zoo, National Geographic, Education Seattle, and the Granby Zoo.